Morning, Grace. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Chris Holloway. I'm a member here, and I've been helping out with the Patriotic Service for, I think it's been 4 years now, and doing it in partnership with Dale Timlin, and I'll say that I'm very honored to carry on this tradition after he went home with the Lord this year. So I'm happy to be here, and happy to share this time with you, and just very thankful that we can all be here and do this all together. So this Independence Day, we are very blessed with the opportunity to listen to a hero. And to that end, I've simplified our program this year so that we can emphasize our speaker and do communion, because I think those two things speak for themselves. So over the last year, I've been enrolled in a program called the Army War College. Now, this school is an important piece of professional development for officers, but I really just took the class because the title impresses my boys. Now, it's been a distance education program, so, that means you're on the internet, you're reading, you're writing, you're on forums and writing papers and stuff. But for the last 2 weeks, I've been in a place called Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is real close to Harrisburg, for a 2-week resident period. And among other things, I was privileged during that time to tramp around the battlefields of Antietam and Valley Forge. And this was a really important reminder, a sort of a poignant reminder, that liberty is only secured through sacrifice. And this has direct parallels into what we believe as Christians, that where through Jesus' sacrifice, he secures the blessings of liberty from the punishment of sin for our sin. And can you go to the next slide, please? Many of you may recognize this slide and maybe recognize the words that are written on it. And many of you in this room may have noted that language like this is conspicuously absent from our cultural discussion today. And I know everybody feels that way. Well, one of the things that I did as part of my curriculum, I was privileged to attend several Pentagon briefings. I know the military in the room are probably rolling their eyes at this point. But among other things, so that was one of the things I was privileged to do. And I can assure you on personal experience that our both civilian and military leadership are aware of the stakes of our current world environment, and they understand in a way that's very similar to the language that's on the slide that failure is not an option, and in reality, second place is totally irrelevant. And our leaders are very much aware of that, so that should help you feel a little bit better that that type of thinking has maintained its way into our leadership today. Next slide, please. I'm going to start talking about our speaker. In 1944, our nation faced a similar problem, although much, much larger in scale. And in that spirit, it's my distinct honor to introduce our speaker today, Ralph Kling, a lieutenant colonel, retired, U.S. Army Air Corps, and United States Air Force. Next slide, please. He joined the Army Air Corps in 1943 and learned to fly the P-47 Thunderbolt, and that was the workhorse of World War II in terms of aviation. Next slide, please. He shot down a German Air Force, a Luftwaffe Me-109, that's a German fighter plane, for one victory. And he flew missions before, on, and after D-Day. Next slide, please. He was hit by anti-aircraft fire in September of 1944, bailed out, was captured, and interned in Stalag Luft III, which was a German POW camp for aviators. This camp was immortalized in the story of The Great Escape. Many of you have seen that movie, and our speaker is going to talk in detail about that, so I don't want to steal any of his thunder. Next slide, please. Later, during transfer to a subsequent camp, he escaped and was liberated in April of 1945. Next slide, please. After the war, he returned to California, continuing to serve as a teacher and school administrator. He retired to Ramona and is one of our honored neighbors. His wife of 73 years, Irene, is here with us today, and their daughter Janet. And I believe that we will be truly edified by his experiences and by his godly perspective. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Lieutenant Colonel retired Ralph Kling.
Nice to have it on the podium, though. This is Independence Day, and I got one thing I want to tell you. It's difficult for us to fully comprehend the risk the signers of our Declaration of Independence faced when they committed their names to this hallowed document 241 years ago. They knew it would be seen as an act of treason that could lead not only to their own death or ruin, but their loved ones as well. And yet they committed this tremendous act of bravery for the sake of future generations. We are their fortunate heirs. We're a wonderful country because of the people who went before us. I tell a story once in a while in different places. That's the first time I had a large group like this to try to tell you how I felt about growing up during this war period. So I'm asking you to just take a moment and relax and that it's 1941 and I'm 17 years old. And Irene is 15. And we're going to Hillmar High School, a little town in Central California. And we're in love. Maybe a lot of people didn't think we knew what we were doing, but we talked this over. In fact, we met every day somewhere between classes or for lunchtime or before in school or after school. We both lived far enough away to get to school on a bus. So we get to school, meet each other, sit down, start talking about this, talking about that. We really discussed everything you can think of. And one of the important things was we both were pretty good about going to church. My family went to a Lutheran church, and Irene's family went to a different church, but they had the same God. And we realized that most of the things that happened to us, God had something to do with them. So we made that clear right from the beginning that the two of us would meet, and every decision we made, we would share with God to make sure we were doing the right thing. Don't forget, this is a guy who's only 17 and his girlfriend is 15. So remember, I don't think there's anybody here alive who was alive in 41. We had a lot of Japanese kids in our school because there was truck farming in our community. And those kids were really good to have in your class because they could bounce ideas off of them. They played on our basketball teams. We had good friends. And all of a sudden, here comes December 7th, 1941, and the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor. It's a Saturday. On Sunday, that's a Sunday. On Monday morning, the principal of our school got us into the gymnasium, turned the radio on, and broadcast President Roosevelt's speech. I don't remember that there were any Japanese at that time. They're still with us. But the Japanese kids were gone before the week was out. And we heard President Roosevelt declare war on the Japanese. So that was quite an experience. So, trying to move on here. Our plans were that I would go on to college. I'd be a coach in a high school, and Irene made all of her clothes when she was going to high school. earned money during the summer picking grapes and made her own clothes. So when 1942 came along and I and my twin brother graduated from high school, we went to the University of California because an older brother had, and we were going to be engineers. Well, that didn't last very long. Both Roger and I decided we'd join the Army, and we both became pilots, and both flew P-47s. I flew out of England, and he flew out of Italy. He flew 101 missions and got the DFC, and I flew something like 67 missions and came home with one victory. So I want to tell you a little bit about the experience. I've never had so much trouble with a speech as I have with this one. Really. Okay. So I graduate. I'm a pilot. I go to England. Check in with the 365th. I get a flight leader, so I'm a wingman, and we always flew on like the fingernails of your left hand. Your middle finger would be the flight leader, and your pointy finger would be his wingman. Your ring finger would be an element leader, and the little finger would be his wingman. Wherever you went, you always flew together. You always tried to always be on the wing of the guy who's in charge, and so it's the flight leader or the element leader. We had a couple of missions that one just recently we've been studying. Is that one of the guys that was leading a mission, a guy named Harry Katowski, we were flying close to the ground, and he said, fly straight and level, I want to check something out. And he put his nose down, he went down, he never came back. And so I'm still flying along, and the guys behind us, the element leader, moved up and took us back. And it was just years later when we were visiting in France, we were able to get back to that area and see what happened to Katowski. And we found some older folks that were there and actually saw the plane come in, and they told us that the Germans had hit the plane and probably killed him because he just dove down into the ground. The community saved his body, and his body was buried and later was brought back to Pennsylvania, where he's from. But the community put up a nice little statue for him and a little burial sign in France. It's still there today, so we've seen that. There isn't anything that you could compare to flying a fighter plane with. I mean, it is the most exciting thing in the world to be sitting there in this thing, and you can pull the trigger that says fire a burst of 6, and 8 50 caliber machine guns shoot eight shells every time. Boom, 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 boom. They really do a lot of damage. We were really good at it. We didn't use the guns very often. What we used most of the time was a 500-pound bomb, and we'd fly out in formation to where General Patton was. And General Patton's crew were always trying to get rid of the enemy tanks, and they're a hard vehicle to destroy. But we could carry a 500-pound bomb real easily, and someone figured out how we could put a 10-second delayed bomb, a 10-second delayed fuse on the bomb. so that we could dive down, drop the bomb exactly where we wanted it, and then pull up. You could look back and watch it explode. So when we would run a mission to where Patton was, one of the planes in our mission, usually the number 2 plane, the guy flying the wing of the leader, we had 5 channels on the radio, so he'd be on B channel maybe, talking to the guy in the tank. And they'd ask us to hit a tank over there or over here, wherever. So this guy would tell the leader where to go. We'd go drop the bomb on the tank and destroy it. The guy on the ground would tell him, nice going, we got it. It was really good communications between the ground and the plane. I want to tell when I got shot down, but before I do, I want to take credit for a victory. Trouble is, it is not a heck of a lot of skill involved in that particular flight. A new guy came into the squadron, a guy named Coffee. Eventually, Coffee became a representative in Congress. But when he came in, he had a lot of rank, and it was a big deal. He gets to lead the mission. And I don't remember where we were going or what we were going to do, but remember, I lost my flight leader, so that was my job from then on. Whenever they went someplace, I was always the wingman. So I'm Coffee's wingman. And we're flying still in France, and we're at about maybe 6,000 or 7,000 feet, going someplace. And I look down, and I see there's a bunch of what looked to me like British planes. British has a Hawker Hurricane and a Spitfire, and it looked like they were fiddling around down there. We're about 5,000 or 6,000 feet. But I called it in. I said, bogeys at 3 o'clock on the deck. And his comment was, check it out. Well, we were never allowed to do that. But here's the new boss, and he says, check it out. I'm carrying a 500-pound bomb. So I know that's just darn British down there. I got to leave this. So I figured I'll just dive down there, identify him, join back up. I got down there, and it was a ME-109 coming off a pass. And I want you to know we were passing each other this way and this way. We were so close, I could have shaken his hand. His eyes were so big. This is a little airplane. It fit in here real easy. And away he went, and away I went, and we never saw each other again. So I climbed back up to join the squadron, and I stick my nose down, and there out in front of me is an ME-109. So it was pretty simple. I hit the button, fire a burst of 6. The shells in the plane, there's four guns in each wing. They cross at about 350, 400 yards. And this plane was right in between, just like the microphone. So I give it a little rudder, and I hit him, fire burst of 6, and plane turns over and dives into the ground. Big deal, that's it. So, you know, when you do your job, that's all there is to it. You don't have to stand around waiting and get told what a great job you did. Do what you're supposed to do. Make sure God knows what you're doing. And most of all, make sure your wife knows what you're doing too. We have always been very close to making decisions about everything. I mean, we don't, there's nothing that either of us do that the other hasn't given an okay or had some comments about how you could do it better. So I'm on another mission. I'm moved up now. I'm an element leader. And we're out fighting tanks for Patton. And the guy on the patents guy called and asked us to knock out this building. It was a building about the size of the church here. And he couldn't get it done, so he asked us if we would knock it out, because there was something in there that was German and he wanted to get rid of it. So we're not carrying bombs. The only thing we had was our guns, but 850s do a lot of damage. So we were going to strafe this building and destroy it. On my pass, as I pulled up from the pass, I saw a guy on the ground who was shooting at us. And I guess every time one of our planes went over like this, he was shooting at us. Well, the lucky guy hit my gas line right next to my left foot. Immediately, there's gas in the bottom of the cockpit. I was on a mission maybe a month earlier before that, in a flight of 4, when number 4 flew up under number 3, and I saw how big that explosion was. So I know this plane that I'm in now is going to explode quickly. And I'm right on the deck. And, I just shot this building, and here comes this gas out of this gas line next to my foot. There's nothing to think about. Just open that canopy and start getting out the right side. You always went on the right side because the propeller went this way, and that would help. The air around the plane would help get you underneath the cockpit. I'm pretty high. I'm pretty low. I'm not very high. I just had this straight pass, but I got out as far as my legs. So I'm laying back. I must be traveling. What do you think, Chris? 350 maybe, at least. At 300 or 350 miles an hour, you don't move around much. The wind is very strong. I managed to get out on my legs, out so far as my legs were back in the plane, and I asked God to let me go, and I was free, just like that. I started pulling straps and stuff, and the chute opened right away. I managed to look up and see the chute because somebody had bailed out the week before and forgot to look up and see the chute. So I managed to look up and see the chute, look down, hit the ground, and just walked away. It was no big deal at all. So took the chute and wrapped it up and put it underneath a haystack that was there, and started walking away because I know there's Germans in the area and there's American tanks someplace. So I got to get someplace and hide. There was no undercover stuff, some trees. So I figured I'd go get in the tree area and maybe climb a tree or hide behind a trunk or something. So I hadn't gone 50 feet, maybe from here to the front of the building. And 2 Germans stood up with guns on me, just, didn't say anything. So I walked over there, and I'm a prisoner of war. I didn't realize it at the moment, but my face had been burned. All the hair on my head, what little was all gone. My arms were okay because we wore gauntlet gloves that went clear up to your elbow. My legs were burned up to my knees. And I could feel no pain. So these 2 guys, Germans, looked me over and made motions to go with them. And we went someplace. Does anybody know what the Siegfried Line is? The Siegfried Line was a bunch of German buildings that had guns on them that went down underground. And so we went to one of those buildings, and they took me down a couple of levels and just let me sit there. And then finally they got me back up, and a German captain came in a German Jeep, and he was going to take me someplace. So he had a driver. He put me in the back seat. He had a dog. He put the dog between us, and it was not a friendly dog. And he has his gun, and he sits there facing me. You know, I'm just starting to feel the pain. There's no way I'm going to do anything. I'm in pain, and his dog wants me, and he's going to shoot me if I do anything wrong. So it was quite a long ride. No windshield in this German Jeep. So we're driving along 50 miles an hour with the wind against my burnt face. I'm on fire, really on fire. We stopped someplace, and I'm brought into this building and told to go sit in the corner. And then a high-ranking German officer came over and looked at me. I had just the week before turned in my old A2 for a new one. Anybody here not know what an A2 is? A2 is a nice leather jacket that you wear. The Air Force, I think, made the best ones, made out of goatskin or something, very light. And they've got your insignia and your name. And he wanted that jacket. And I surely didn't want to give it to him. But, you know, I lost again. He got the jacket. And that's not a big thing, but it was to me. It really, really bothered me. So eventually I got taken to some kind of a building in big town in southern Germany. Name slips my mind right now, but it appeared to be kind of like a theater, in that it had seats like this and then a stage, and they put me on the stage, and these guys were taking care of my legs and wrapping my face up. And whatever it was, they wrapped me up with some kind of a pink gauze. The pain went away immediately. And it was really wonderful to lose that pain. And it would have been all right, except we waited 2 days to take the bandages or replace the bandages. So when they took them off, the new skin went with them. So I was back in pain again. Yeah, these were French veterinarians, I found out later, who were serving as doctors for all of the people who had come to Germany from other countries to work in the war industry. So there were Spanish people there, and Greek people there, and Yugoslavia, you name it, they were there. And they slept in cots in the building. And I was there for maybe 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks. My only food was something in a straw, because my head was wrapped up all that time. And when I was healed well enough so I could walk and the blood didn't run off my legs, a German guy came and took me on a train. We rode a train for about a day, maybe longer, I don't know. And we went someplace where I was going to be interrogated. There's a German interrogator who had a reputation from World War I, and he's still there at World War II, but he's got quite a reputation. So I get to this area, and they put me in solitary confinement. Solitary confinement's not so bad the first 5 minutes, but after 5 minutes you realize there's nothing else in the world to do. I mean, you got a thing to lay on so you're not on the floor, but that's it. And so that takes a little doing, how to get to that point that you can exist with nothing happening in a crowded little space just big enough for you. Eventually, I get interviewed by this guy, and he didn't ask me very many questions because he already knew I was with the 365th and a member of the 388th, and we were on a mission to wherever it was. This guy knew all about my outfit. The Germans evidently collected information from newspapers in the country where people would send in, my son or daughter did this, and they traveled here. They're in the service, and they listed who they're with and where they are. They got all that information and then used it to talk to guys who they got captured. So at any rate, they decided that I didn't know enough to be bothered with, and they put me on a train and sent me down to Stalag Luft 3. Stalag Luft 3 is a camp that the Germans put all their captured officers who were flyers. So here we got 5 compounds. We had a north compound and a south compound, an east compound and a west compound and a center compound. And I used to know exactly, the British were in 2 and the Americans were in 2 and the French and whatever was in the other one. But this camp was built by the German Luftwaffe. The Luftwaffe means that they're Air Force. Wehrmacht meant they were ground forces. And never the two shall meet. Those two, the Wehrmacht was always getting the dirty end of the deal. And we had a pretty nice place. We got Red Cross parcels once a week. We were counted once a week. There were 2,000 in my compound and probably 2,000 in each one of the others. So that's 5 compounds. So we're looking at 10,000 POWs. The Germans called us Kriegsgefangene. Well, the Americans couldn't walk up to somebody and say, hey, you're a Kriegsgefangene. No, they changed that to Kriegi, shorted to Kriegi. So I'm a Kriegi. So if you ever meet anybody who says he's a Kriegi, it means he was a prisoner of war someplace. Could have been in Japan as well. Okay. So I'm a Kriegi, and I'm in Stalag Luft 3, and remember, I came from this place where they were looking to, by the time I get there, my pants are kind of shorts, and everything, I'm really ragged. And I sit down in the office of this prisoner of war camp's commander of the camp, and he said, you sit here. And a little bit later, a guy named Don Hillman comes and says, yeah, that's Kling, we can keep him. They thought I was a German shill being sent in by the Germans to figure out what's going on in the camp. Because there's a lot of stuff going on in the camp. So I'm in the camp. Now I'm a prisoner. I'm identified. They got their own. The stuff that we had in this prison camp, you would hardly believe. the YWCA and other organizations in our country just sent stuff over. They had all kinds of band uniforms. They had stuff that you would use if you were going to put on a play, and for to dressing up. Anyway, they had musical instruments, baseball stuff, football stuff, most of which we never really used, but our country did a good job sending stuff to us in camp, and a lot of times it got there. They counted us once a day. We'd lined up 5 deep, and you had to stand right in line. And if somebody had a complaint about somebody, you might screw up the line a little bit like this, and the German officer might just cancel it and send you back to the barracks. 5 minutes later, he'd call us out again. And so, darn Americans, we'd always find something to not bother the other guy, but just, for the heck of it, I guess. What do you do? There's nothing else to do but get counted. And if you don't behave, we'll count you again. And it doesn't make any difference if it's raining or not. We're going to get counted. And the guy goes down there, eins, zwei, vier, fünf, and we're 5 deep. And the guy in the back row just slips over a little bit. Got to start over again. They weren't the smartest guys in the world. They put, maybe there's 4 or 5 guys in the camp who never made it through kindergarten, I'm sure. And their job was to pick up and clean up, take care of the mess inside the camp that the Kriegies made. And those poor guys, you could buy anything. Because in our Red Cross parcels, we had 4 cigarettes, 1 chocolate bar, plus all the other stuff. So everything in the camp had a value of bars. It was worth 2 bars or 1 bar. A bar was probably somewhere between $3 and $5 in value. But there was, if you wanted your picture taken, or if you wanted, but you could take your picture, but you wouldn't get the picture till the war's over. If you wanted it painted, there's a guy who would paint your picture of you, or he would paint your airplane in its position when you got shot down, because the Americans had sent paint stuff for guys. This camp was really organized, I'm telling you, it really was. So it's now December 44, and the war is going to wrap down pretty quick. 44, maybe it's 45. At any rate, the Germans realize that the American prisoners of war are arbitrarily something they could use in the negotiations to finish the war, and the Russians are coming like crazy, so we better move these Americans to the West. So on December 31st, 1945, I think it was, at 10 o'clock at night, my barracks got out and started the hike. We were going to go west. And there's 2 feet of snow on the ground, and we knew it was going to happen, so we had saved up as much as we could. And we got out on the road, and we marched, I think, 2 weeks. It's a long march. I think we made 52 days at any rate. It snowed the first 2 days, and that was a really long night. At any rate, we got to Spremberg. They put us in a big building, gave everybody a big bowl of sauerkraut, and nobody got sick from eating sauerkraut. The next day they put us on a train, and we were going to go someplace west rather. And I'll tell you a story about how the train we were jammed in there, shoulders to shoulders. And we did stop once in a while to get out and go to the bathroom. So they stopped this train, and I'm in the car that I'm in. We look down the hill. It's a lot of grass, but it was downhill, maybe 50 yards. So I get out. I got to go to the bathroom. So I don't like to go right close to the train because I'm a little modest. So I went as far as I could out there, dropped my drawers and did my thing, and turned to get back up and look. That was a mistake going all the way down there. All those other guys were up there doing a mess that I got to walk through to get back to the train. Jeez. How do you remember stuff like that, huh? Well, we get on a train, and we end up in a place called Mooseburg. They didn't know we were coming, and they weren't prepared for us, and they just turned us loose. We had a chain link fence and a water tap and 2,000 Kyrgyz. So that's it. You're going to sleep out on the ground, and you'll get water. And, well, you know what the Kyrgyz did? They built little fireplaces, or little stoves. They had a shoestring and a handle, and they could turn it like this, and it'd make air, and you could burn little sticks. You could boil water in a minute or two, and we had coffee on there. So we got by, and so Patton comes along and liberates us, and war's over, and everybody, the war's not over, excuse me, we're liberated. So a guy in our squadron named Baker and I told Baker, our squadron is at a town that I've forgotten right now. I said, let's go back there. War's still on. Maybe we can still fly. So sure enough, it took me a whole day to convince him to go. But we jumped over the fence, caught a bus or truck ride from American trucks going that way. And we got there in a day. And the squadron is still there. My best friend, our best man at our wedding is there, his name Maltby. His brother announces golf matches. So I asked Lynn, hey, get your plane out. Let me get in the seat. Then you sit on my lap. I want to get in the air. Just get in the air. So he gets his plane out. I get in the seat. He sits down in front of me. We're out the end of the runway, ready to go. And Colonel Hill calls it, Ron, Maltby, he gets cling with you. He says, yeah. You can't take him up. So that was it. We had to go back. So I'm really disappointed. But the courier plane goes to all the air bases that day and lands in Paris. So we'd been to Paris before. So I took the courier plane and landed at Paris. And we had a good time at Paris. You check in at the hotel, grand hotel. This is the war wrapping up now. So they had this hotel for people like me who was running around loose. So you sign in the hotel, they assign you a room, give you a key, and a ticket to Le Havre on the train the next day to go to Le Havre and wait in Camp Lucky Strike before you get a boat to go home. So we go get our key, get our $80, go downtown to Pigalle, look up and down, look at all the pretty girls on the avenues, come back, spend the night in the hotel, and miss the train. So we missed the train for about a week, and people were starting to recognize us, so we figured we better go. So we went down there. We got to Le Havre. They put us on the back of trucks and a big canvas over us because it was raining. We drove out to the field where these guys, we could look down, it was Camp Lucky Strike. They named them the camps after cigarettes. There must have been 250,000 guys at Camp Lucky Strike waiting to go home. So we wrapped ourselves up in the canvas, went back to the train station, and went back to wherever the name of that town is now, and spent a few more days, and then went on down to the camp, waited until we come home. Got home, Irene was ready for me, and that was the end. War is over. We're happy. I finished school. I had a most wonderful experience as a coach and as a teacher. I was at Fremont High School in Sunnyvale, California. We have about 2,500 kids in school, and after a couple of things, I took a year's leave, went to Europe once, came back, and eventually they made me the principal because the guy ahead of me was running some kind of a program that was really difficult. So I thought the superintendent wanted me to get rid of the program, but no, he said, keep it. So I ran that darn thing for 11 years, principal of 11 years in this high school. I'd really like to tell you what a great time it was, but it would take too long. I think that's about it. You've been very kind to listen to me blabber away. I made a deal with Chris. I want to go in his plane.
Well, sir, on behalf of the congregation of Grace Community Church, it's my honor to thank you. And we're so blessed that you were able to come and speak to us and tell us about your life and times. And I can tell you that from our heart that we are edified and grateful that you were able to come and talk to us today. And then I'd like to present you with a drawing from my son Liam, who has been frantically drawing your P47 throughout your talk. So I'll be happy to.
Is that your boy?
Yes, it is.
I like to have that.
Thank you very much. And turn it over to you for a moment of prayer for those that have served and are currently serving.
Thank you, Colonel. Good morning. My name is Mike Ernst. I'm a retired lieutenant commander who did 25 years in the Navy. And before we go and honor the people who are currently on active duty, we would like to first acknowledge the veterans in our office or in our presence, and also our first responders, retired first responders. So if you've served in the military or a first responder, please stand to be recognized. Thank you for your service. So what I want to do now is just read members either from our congregation or relatives or connections that people have forwarded the names to, people on active duty. And at the end, I want to close in prayer for those people. And one thing about the people that are on active duty right now, much like the colonel, they joined, or if they were already in, they've re-enlisted during a time that our country's at war. And when you enlist, which is what I did, you really don't know where you're going to go. You know, it's called the needs of the Navy in my case. So the people that join now, they don't know where they're going to go. They might be, you know, I've had friends that were on ships that went a year to Iraq or Afghanistan just out of the blue. So they never know where they're going to go. And as we sit here right now on the 4th of July, week. There's people right now standing watch somewhere in the middle of the ocean. There's people standing watch somewhere in the middle of Afghanistan. There's people dealing with some crisis right now. There's a 19-year-old kid sitting on a guard post somewhere, scared out of his brains right now. And they come from places just like Ramona, from all over our country, who make the decision to serve. So I'll start, and I'll kind of go in order of seniority as far as the services. So we'll start with the Army, and I just want to say the names so you can have them in prayer as we continue throughout the celebration this week and enjoying our freedoms. Army, Brandon Baramita. Army, Sarah LaFuse, Gilbert Cardona, Tyler Markland, First Lieutenant Garrett Stevens. Marine Corps, Cliff Wakeman, Paul Wheatler Jr., Rod Fink, David Ogilvy, Caleb Nelson, Steve Miller, Kyle McLaughlin, Chris Holloway. United States Navy, Kevin Davey, Lieutenant Aaron Lucas, Evan Young. Air Force, Lieutenant Andrew Farron, Lieutenant Meredith Prinz, Jim Kaufman, Grant Mitchell, Connor Maruna, Jonathan Cervantes, Lieutenant Tyler Jordan. Law enforcement first responders, Brian Kaki and Robert Farron. If we pray now, please bow your heads as we pray for our active duty service members. Dear Lord, our hearts are filled with gratitude for the men and women who serve our country and for the sacrifices their families make so that we can all enjoy the blessings of freedom. We praise you for calling them to help protect us and for giving them the courage and ability to do their jobs well. Guide their choices and their actions, Lord. Help them to see you working in their daily lives, whether in the field, at home, or abroad. Surround them with your mighty angels. Protect them in your mercy. Cover them with your grace. Guard their hearts while they are far from loved ones, and bless them with moments to cherish when they are together. Hold these families close, Lord. May they look to you for the strength and peace that only you can give. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.